Waterbox Live. Favorite day of the week is Wednesday. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, share the stream. Definitely follow that. And this week we are going to be doing feeding of the corals on the FRAG. So we're going to actually talk about techniques of feeding, what type of corals need it, and get all the corals fed and happy in there. Let's get it started. All right, we are back, and Rich is out this week, so you are stuck with just me. Guys are back there running the show on the computers and the camera, of course. So we last week added some corals from Worldwide into the FRAG. We're revisiting that build. You can check out the full 10-week build that we started about 6-7 months ago, and we did it from the very beginning on for a 10-week build. And last week we added corals, so this week we're going to talk about feeding your corals, why it's important, and what types of corals need certain types of food, because it's very important for growth, color, to actually just feed your corals a certain way. So we're going to do that on the FRAG today. Are we going out there now?
You want to head out there right now?
Okay, I didn't know if you had pull in any questions or anything. Keenan's running the show behind there.
We can just say hello to Timothy, Shane, Jim Murphy, Urban Reef Dreams, Furman 820. Shane Emery, thank you guys for joining us. We can head out there.
All right, let's go feed some corals. The FRAG is looking mighty beautiful today. So last week we got the corals in from Worldwide. I did go ahead and put them in their place on the rock, fill in some of the empty spots we have. We are just about maxed out in this aquarium, and now it's just time to let everything grow in. And a lot of doing that, getting the best growth from your corals, comes from feeding them and making sure you're meeting their needs for that. So I guess we're going to start with kind of the simplest feeding method, which is called broadcast feeding. You're going to do this for a lot of your corals. Soft corals and SBS are generally broadcast feeders, which means they have small polyps. They're going to catch small particles from the water column. They're not going to take bigger chunks like your other types of corals. So what I do with that is, you have a couple options. One is like a liquid zooplankton type of food. There's also phytoplankton. And this one just goes in. You just shake it up. You're going to put it right into the water column. And it's going to stir around. And all your smaller mouthed or polyped items are going to just filter feed this out of the water. So it's pretty important. And add a little bit more in there. So this is a zooplankton, amino acids, type of food, and that's going to be for all your like SBS, and a lot of your soft corals are going to take this. Another method of broadcast feeding is actually powdered, like marine plankton, zooplankton. Comes in a powder form versus a liquid. And with that, just take a little bit of your water in a cup. It smells quite delightful if you have smell-o-vision. Very, very fishy, but this is some good stuff. So you're just going to take a little bit into the water, and from there, I'm going to stir it up. Make sure it's all dissolved in there. And that same thing with that is you're going to just broadcast feed that into the water. And let your power heads and your flow kind of just take that around the tank. Great for gorgonians, goniopora, zoanthids, mushrooms, things like that that really just feed on the small particles of the water. Another benefit of this is you're actually going to, by putting in this filter feeding food, it's going to have a lot of your LPS large polyp stonies bring out their feeder tentacles to make it easier for them to eat the bigger food that you're going to feed them. You can actually see here, if you look back behind the red one, that one has its feeder tentacles out. So it's sensing the food in the water from you broadcast feeding, and all those things like acans and Blastos are going to put out feeder tentacles to make it easier to spot feed them the bigger type of food. So I'm going to turn off the system. So pump, power heads, Also turn off the skimmer since your pump's going down, your sump is also going to raising water level, so you want to turn all of that off. And this way we have no flow, which is going to move the food away from the coral. The thing I love about our frag is we have 2 fish and just a couple shrimp, and this allows it really easy to spot feed because you don't have all the fish coming after every piece of food, and they will steal it off your corals if they have the chance. So we're going to let everybody kind of just start to get their feeder tentacles out. There's a lot of types of dry or liquid zooplankton type mixes that are great for broadcast feeding. You can also take that same powder or liquid and, you know, besides broadcast feeding, your zoos and your star polyps and clove polyps and stuff like that are going to take it out of the water column. But for goniopores and alveopores, they're a little bit heavier eaters. So what I like to do is take that powder while it's in the water, and you're actually going to, so like right here, we have a little goniopore, is just gently let some of it fall onto them. These are heavier eaters, and they're not going to do very well if they don't get some specialized feeding. And this way they're getting that concentrated broadcast feeding, basically. And that's going to let them eat more at a time, which is really important for them to kind of grow and do well for you. And actually, I moved some of the goniopores we got from Worldwide last week. This is an alveopora. And you do it really gentle, so you don't want to scare the coral and basically have them retract in. You're letting the food fall onto them. Here's a nice, beautiful pink goni here. And this is going to equal some long-term success with goniopores and alveopores here. And that way it just falls right on them. There's no flow, saturates each of their tentacles, and they're going to actually be able to feed more that way. And you can do that to zoos, leathers, you know, star polyps, all that stuff that generally filter feeds. You can actually kind of concentrate some of it on them and give a little bit heavier feeding to them. So they're going to be happy with that meal. That goes kind of for like chalices and stuff. So then we move on to like your bigger, fleshier corals that like meatier food. In that category, you've got like hammers, torches, Blastos acans, and then like some of your like brain corals. They all have them bigger mouths. They can take in bigger food. And for that, you have 2 options here. So one is using a frozen food, something like mysis or even small pieces of krill. And then you're going to take those and put some actually PE mysis and then regular smaller chunks of mysis frozen. They've defrosted a bit in here. I'm going to take a little bit of tank water in with them because turkey baster is your best friend for spot feeding. Nothing fancy, just go get a $1 turkey baster, works great. We're going to let that defrost. So there's one spot feeding option. And another one that's really kind of simple, and usually you always have it on hand, is actually going to be using pellets. And this is going to allow you to put them onto the coral and let it not float away or be taken as easily. So if you have a lot of fish that type to steal stuff or coral that's a little bit slower eating, pellets tend to work really well because they settle on there and they're a little bit more of like just a set shape and kind of weighted down. So I'm just going to put some of those in the water just so I can grab them easily with the turkey baster. All right, so I'm going to see who's got some feeder tentacles out. I'm going to kind of show you both methods, both frozen food that's been defrosted and also pellets. And if you have big like brains or scalemias, you can actually use chunks of krill, little chopped up pieces of silverside for something super meaty. It's just going to be more like energy to them as far as feeding goes. So this guy's really got his tentacles out in the back here. He is hungry. So I'm just taking a little bit of the mysis into the turkey baster. And you have to be really gentle because you don't, and of course the clowns are going to come take some. There you go, guys. And kind of really gentle with your water stream. See, fish just like to steal coral's food. And you're kind of putting it on each of those heads. You see they have their feeder tentacles and they actually are holding on to it. until their fish steals it. All right, guys, go take some. No, go that way. Feed your fish. They're gonna steal it. Imagine when you have a tank full of fish, they're going to be stealing your coral food. Gets a little bit more challenging. I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple more in here. We got a crab coming. No, no. All right, send him in another direction. There you go. And then like back here, we have some acans. And they have feeder tentacles where they're actually holding this food. They're just kind of gently. This is where your cleanup crew and stuff comes in handy because it is going to be a little bit messier. You can't do this kind of heavy feeding all the time just because it would create a lot of waste into your tank. So this guy's got some feeder tentacles out. Thing is, with these LPS type corals, they're fleshy. When they have these feeder tentacles and the larger mouths, like if you're not feeding them and spot feeding them, their growth is going to be really slow. And you're not really going to get a big reward out of them as far as their growth goes. I'm going to go over to some Blastos. Spot feeding is going to increase growth as well as color. See some beautiful Blastos over here. And they don't really have feeder tentacles, but they got the mouths in the middle. And a lot of times what they're going to do is they're going to close up around the food itself. So you're just trying to kind of get it to stick a little bit to the outside. And they're going to kind of close up. You can see they're already doing it once they have it. They're going to actually close up around the food. I got some Duncans. You see, it actually will close up and almost completely close up around the food until they can basically bring it in their mouth and digest it enough to open back up. So you do generally need your tank down for a little bit of time. And then we have some Duncans up here. Duncans love to eat, and they have some pretty good sticky tentacles. So they're going to catch the food pretty easily. And you don't have to get every single head on here, but just trying to like spread it around. And you see these guys will eat a lot at a time. Let them close up a little bit. But feeding things like Blastos and acans and spot feeding them regularly, you're gonna have them produce 100 times more babies and grow into a larger colony than if you just let them live off the light and general waste and broadcast feeding. They're not gonna really grow that great for you without it. So the other ones we're talking about is like the pellets. These are good for ones that don't have a lot of feeder tentacles out, but they still want to eat, because this is going to kind of just sit there. And it's going to be easier for them to take it in than the mysis will be. So I mean, either one is really good. So like this guy here, doesn't have a ton of feeder tentacles out. Mysis is generally going to probably fall off of it or get stolen pretty easily. Pellets stuck. The pellets decided to stay stuck in the end of it. So then the pellet, see, it just sits right on. And it's going to be easier for that coral to take it in. I think this also works pretty well for stuff like hammers, because it's get it kind of ready into these pellets. Do not want to come out of this one. So they're going to fall on the tentacles and they're actually going to bring them in. So hammers, torches, frog spawns do also have individual mouths on each of the heads and can eat some pretty decent size chunks of food here. So for anything that needs a little more time to eat, I think the pellets work better. And you can really feed it to the same stuff you feed the mysis to if you wanted. And then we'll get some over here. You can see those Blastos are like That one's like almost completely closed up around the food. And the next day after you feed them, like they're gonna open up, they're gonna be puffier, they're gonna be happier. And I've always worked to kind of train your corals that whenever they smell like the liquid or powder food that you put in, they know it's feeding time. And it gets them to put out their feeder tentacle response a lot easier, which is gonna make your feeding process faster and more efficient for the corals. So you're not sitting here kind of waiting for every different coral to open up and be able to spot feed them. Come on. These pellets were a little bit large for this turkey baster. See if you can get in on this one. So that one there is the first one we fed. Completely closed around all of the mysis. And it's gonna now digest and bring that in, then goes right back to normal. And then this one here, you can see his mouth is actually fully open. I think his mysis may have dropped. And he's ready to feed, but he doesn't have anything. I'm gonna try and give him a little bit more. Take that in. And then that one that we gave pellets to that was not having feeder tentacles out is actually slowly closing in on that pellet. Since it kind of just sat there, it was a lot easier for them to actually take in. That one's now eating nice. Generally, like heavy spot feeding once a week. That's about what I suggest. If you can do more, just keep an eye on your nutrients, trying to move a crab from stealing food. Because it does count as waste product in your tank, just you're putting fish food and stuff in. So just make sure that you counteract any extra feeding with water changes and the proper media and stuff like that.
So how long after feeding like this do you do a water change?
If you're doing your normal week to weekly water change, feeding, I wouldn't change your feeding schedule, but if you know you're gonna go in here and you've got a water change coming up in the next day or two and you wanna go in there and feed a little bit extra, go ahead and do that. I would say if you can do it before water change, it's always gonna be better. But if you're kind of on a routine and your maintenance is regular, you shouldn't have to really time it any certain way. Sometimes, however, when we do a feeding show or something on here, because we have to feed a little bit extra to kind of show everything, I'll make sure that a water change is probably done Friday or Monday on this one here. See, that one here is completely closing up on his pellet. And that one with his mouth open now has most of the mysis going in. And then what you want to do is, if you're spot feeding the bigger stuff, is leave your flow and everything off until pretty much all of them have closed up and eaten their food. Because once you kick the flow back on, any of the mysis or pellets that are still just sitting there and haven't been eaten are just going to get kicked off of them. So they're going to miss their feeding time. And if you have things like feather dusters, cocoa worms, gorgonians, definitely make sure that you're feeding them very regularly because they don't do anything with the light. So they're going to need that broadcast spot feeding pretty regularly for them to get enough food. So those will be a little bit more intensive, but your general corals, I think once a week, you should be plenty good. And then once you kick it back on, everything excess is going to go around. Fish will eat it, and then the rest of the powder and liquid food that you put in will also kind of just get filter feeded out by all the other corals. I'm going to give these guys. See, this guy's still open. I don't think I got him. Because you'll see that these guys will actually close up a bit once they get a good feeding. See that? And like I said, you can do that with the zoanthids. Like your chalices have really small eyes, but you can definitely put a little bit of the liquid food on there. It's going to just give them a little extra food power, basically. But those blasters are almost completely done with their mysis over there. Some corals will feed a lot faster than others. But usually a good rule of thumb is leave everything off for 30 minutes. Let everything finish feeding, and then you kick everything right back on. Everything will be super happy tomorrow. All right.
Yeah, let's head back.
All right, so corals are going to finish feeding. We're going to leave the tank off for now, and then about another 20 minutes, we'll kick everything back on. And then should anything excess, your fish will eat, your cleanup crew, that kind of stuff. So then once Keenan gets back in here, he's going to pull some questions. We also are doing 2 sets of Waterbox towels, or microfiber towels. They're great for cleaning your glass, you know, wiping everything down. So we're going to give away 2 of those towards the end of the show. Now, they always pick the winners for that. People that are engaging in the comments, you know, asking good questions, answering other questions. So be active in the comments, and you know, that's where they're picking the winners from. So we'll give away 2 sets of towels in a little bit. But Keenan's got to scroll through about 1 million questions.
There are a lot of questions?
And
That's okay, here, let's do it.
I don't know what they're doing over there.
Command Z.
I'll put one here while I have it. Do Tracky and Lobos get fed shrimp or pellets as well? Actually, both. They can take pretty good chunks of food. So you can feed krill or actually chunks of silverside. I've seen some really good whelsos or cinerinas, brain corals, trachyphilias actually take chunks of silverside, like full silversides, and actually eat them. So they can take a lot of food. You can do pellets if they don't have like a strong feeding response, because they'll sit right in that center where their mouth is, and they'll be able to take them in pretty easily. But I always feel like meatier stuff, if they'll take it, is always going to be better than using pellets on it. So.
I got the first question from Jamel. He's saying, just purchased the Waterbox 50.3, not sure yet on what type of lights to use for a mixed reef. What lights are you guys running?
On the all-in-one 50.3, I would run the prime lights. They're gonna do great for like a mixed reef. If you're looking to do like SBS hard corals and not as much softies or lower light LPS, I would say probably even maybe go up to the Hydra 32s. But for the most part of what people are gonna do with that, the primes are your best bet. And we actually have those as our plus edition on the website, and we actually have the blueprints of what we would run for a mixed reef or like a fish only, depending on what you do. So it's really easy to kind of pick your program. Next.
This question's from Van. He's asking, how do you guesstimate how much space a coral is going to take? Or is there just a rule of thumb on average?
Oh man, okay. It depends on the type of coral. It does, because everything's going to grow differently. So if you have zoanthids or mushrooms, they're going to grow along the rock. They're going to take up more space as they grow, and they're going to grow faster. If you get something like a frog spawn or a hammer, it's going to grow its own skeleton up. Same as leathers. Even though they're soft coral, they're going to grow up and into the water column. If you are looking at chalices, they're going to encrust under the rock some, but a lot of times they'll shelf out. It's so hard to say. Like when you pick out a coral, just ask kind of like its growth pattern and rate, and know how to place it. Realistically is like put them, you know, a couple inches away, but you're gonna end up having to either have them let it battle out, or generally most people end up getting bigger and bigger tanks to fit their corals as they grow. If you're looking to like not have to let them battle or grow bigger, you're gonna leave a pretty good, 6-8 inches in between each coral to let them fully grow, if you don't want to have anything interact over time.
I think that's best to always go with your rule, always get the bigger tank that you can get.
Yeah, that's true. So, you know, because corals are going to grow, there's tons of fish out there everyone wants, get as big as you can to start. It's going to be longer until you think about doing that upgrade, or, oh my God, I want more corals or fish, but you're out of space already. So go as big as you can in the beginning.
Tyrian is asking, does this mess with the parameters? And I'm guessing he's talking about when you broadcast fed, because a couple of questions are along the same lines.
Yeah.
So does broadcast feeding affect the parameters of the tank?
It's any type of food that goes into the aquarium. It doesn't matter if fish food, if it's coral food, amino acids, like anything like that is going to have an effect on nitrate and phosphate just because it's a food and that makes a waste product. How much of an effect will depend on how big of a tank it is, how much you're feeding, and then also like what your protein skimmer is, what kind of media do you run and change regularly, what's your water change schedule. You know, that's going to all affect like how much it affects your tank. If you're doing it like once a week, you have a regular maintenance schedule, you have a good size skimmer, like it's going to be pretty nominal on what you do. But if you're doing it there every single day, or you don't have the proper equipment, it's going to have a bigger effect on the nitrates and phosphates. But always just keep an eye on your levels no matter what, so you know everything's staying within range.
Here's a question from Jang. I sometimes find damage on my corals the day after I spot feed them. Wondering what it could be.
I mean, the feeding won't cause that, but I would say if you've got crabs in there, maybe some more aggressive or carnivorous crabs, it could be them crawling all over the coral and also actually trying to grab the food. So they have claws, they may be small, but they're trying to get the food out of the coral's mouth. They can actually go in there and kind of rip it. And them climbing on it with their big clunky shell, like that blue knuckle hermit I kept knocking off. Like he's got a big old shell, so like if he's dragging it across the coral, it can, you know, cause some tissue damage to them. So that may be something that you want to kind of keep on if there's certain crabs in there that are causing trouble.
Okay. Andrew Cabanas is asking, what's your favorite coral to feed? Mine is definitely a scolie. My scolies look insane while eating.
I have to agree with that because like I was saying before, I've had scolies and I've seriously fed them like a full silver side. And it's crazy, like this little thing is like, I don't know, 4 inches across. You put a silver side on there and it like domes up like over it and somehow manages to eat the whole thing. So I say scolies and, you know, brains and stuff that can take big type of food. They have really awesome feeder tentacles, and just watching them eat is pretty impressive what they can take down as a coral.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one out here. Shane has asked it twice, so I'm
Okay.
guessing he really wants to see it. And he's saying, my wife will only allow me to go over 120 gallons if the stand and canopy are wood and match our living room. Can I use the Waterbox tank, plumbing, and sump if I make my own cedar stand?
We don't sell them separate. So it does come as a set if you choose to not use the stand. I mean, there's people that have chosen not to, so you don't have to, but you can't purchase it without the stand because they are full kits. Just know that it does void warranty if it's not on a Waterbox cabinet. So you can definitely do it. And, you know, if it means you can get a big old tank, a beautiful Waterbox and make it match. But I've also had people that have gotten the Waterbox stand and done a covering on it, keeping it as is, but done a covering on it to match their decor. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds that way, and it's just basically a facade or whatever to make it match. The canopy, you can do a floating canopy. Check out our Waterbox group. I've seen people make floating canopies because you cannot put a canopy on a rimless aquarium. So it does have to be a floating type. So Waterbox official user group, and get some ideas there so that you can keep the warranty and make it match and make the wife happy.
Yeah, some people have used vinyl. Vinyls stick on, you know.
Yeah, there's the vinyl coverings. I mean, I've seen, you know, you can even do it like a fake front or whatever. That can be removed as you need to. So I mean, there's a lot of options to still keep the full system and your warranty on it. Hopefully that gets you a bigger tank, Shane.
You do want to go with the biggest tank you can get.
Mm-hmm. But you also need a happy wife, so
yes.
You have to figure out a way to have both of those.
You have to have both. Mr. Pontiac 80 is asking, when feeding coral with multiple heads, do they share the nutrition as a whole or only that head?
I don't know the scientific answer to this, but I'm pretty sure at least a majority of them need to be fed for them to survive because it's putting the energy into then continuing to grow. So I don't believe that one is giving energy to the other, but if you try each time to hit most of them, between all the feedings, all of them are going to get fed. So it may not be every single one every time, as a lot of times you have like big colonies and their heads, the big heads are on top, but they have tons of babies around the bottom. So the big ones will then put some energy into the smaller ones, but try to feed all of them at some point. I guess. But it's impossible to go and say every single head gets a piece of mysis today, but just try to, over time, make sure everyone gets fed.
Okay, Andrew Cabanas is asking, how do you approach feeding method for clams?
Clams are going to filter feed. You really don't need to do much more than that. They're heavily reliant on light. So you do need to have a very strong light, and they're going to filter feed a lot. So generally, you're not ever going to want to like take food and like put it on them because it's going to stress them and make them close, and they're not going to filter feed. So what you want to do is really have them in a spot that when you do your broadcast feeding, and it's kind of like the same for like clams, feather dusters, gorgonians, and things like that, is whenever you put like your liquid or coral like dry powdered in front of like a power head or your return line, and you know which cycle it goes through the aquarium. So usually we'll make one type of turn or a loop. Have your stuff there where it's the first place that it kind of hits so that it's getting a good burst of food every time you feed. But you don't want to go to a clam and go and like squirt food on it because it's just not going to take it. And then keep your calcium elevated because they're going to use a lot of it to build their shell.
Awesome.
All right.
Sorry, I'm trying to...
It's okay. It's a breather to have a moment of not talking, so we're good.
A little bit of a lull.
A little bit of a lull. So, but there's a lot of people very active in here.
Yeah, I love it.
A lot of good questions. So.
I love it when they answer their own questions. Like
yes, I know. They're all helping
each
each other out. It's great.
It's part of the community. That's how that's.
It
what
is. It's the Waterbox family. Like.
Okay, here's one more. This one's from the land dolphin.
The one and only dolphin.
Oh. You can read this one.
Can you do a torch garden, or will they sting each other? For the most part, as a good rule, they're not going to sting each other. So a lot of times Euphilia in general, torches, hammers, and frog spawns can all be pretty close together. There's more chance of like a torch stinging a frog spawn or vice versa, but a lot of times you can commingle them. All torches, very rarely are you going to have one that's overly aggressive to another. It can happen, but you'll see, like, I've seen people on our user group and it's a whole tank of hammers or a whole tank of frog spawns, and it's just tons of them in there. So for the most part, they're going to get along. It's kind of like zoanthids. Like, put them together, they generally are all going to grow together and create like a big mat of them. So similar types of corals generally will not sting. I can't guarantee it.
Time for the winners.
All right, so we're going to do winners. We're doing 2 sets of the Waterbox microfiber towels, so 3 towels in each set. We have 2 winners that have been chosen. And I think we have a cool drum roll. All ready? Whoa! Winners are Detroit and Tom Tyrone. I hope I said those right. All right.
Detroit and Tom Tyrone.
Okay, good. The little confetti totally make it harder to see it.
Right, well,
Congratulations. Email support@waterboxaquariums.com. Give them your information. They will verify that you're the winner and get you hooked up with your set of microfiber towels, which are also available on Waterbox Aquariums for purchase, as well as like Drop Your Knowledge tees, all kinds of good stuff on there. So do check it out. Great towels for wiping down your aquarium. And I think that's it. And Rich should be here next week, so I'm not solo. We miss you. And, you know, tune in every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We're here. See you next week.
Thank you all for watching. Remember, we're live on Facebook and YouTube, so make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and hit those notifications.
We're live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us next week. Thanks for watching.